Basic information of the lecture. If somebody remember, in the last week we started to analyze a medieval European economy. Basically, a medieval European economy had two poles, a northern poles and the southern poles. Like physical processes, two poles somehow try to communicate with each other. A northern pole was a low country, basically with textile industry and interconnected to Baltic area. And the southern poles basically organized a distributor trade with Asian spices. This is the basic structure of European economy. And in my last sentence of the last lecture, I spoke to you that we try to analyze the connection between the northern and the southern poles. If we are looking at a city and the urban network of Europe, we can identify, former time was here a stick, it's disappeared. Okay, but I use other one. Oh. We can identify two poles, a northern poles and a southern poles. And between two poles, organize a meeting place, a place where communicate the most important merchants of medieval Europe. Why so important? Because somehow try to organize a European economic space. Because a northern poles industrial center and the southern poles a commercial center was and were. Therefore, specialization of European economic poles were basically different. And look at which place organized as a meeting place. It's located on the northern, eastern boundary of Europe. This area named Champagne and Brie. Recently, if you walk to the supermarket, a champagne, you know this is a beverage, alcoholic beverage. But a lot of other products produced in Champagne, but most famous is a champagne. And this is the name of category of this beverage. And the second one, a Brie. It's a typical product of county of Brie, a cheese, you know, a soft cheese. It's a quite special. But very important to tell that this area on the Middle Ages, on the high Middle Ages, wasn't part of France, a French kingdom. Why so important? Because a merchant and traders and the businessmen don't like, not only in the historical past, even recently, the strong power, a strong power. If there is an option for them, escape from this area, escape, and try to find a flexible and weak political actors. On the time, the Comte of Champagne and Brie was a very, very weak political actor. Ideal place, because a Comte of Champagne and Brie, no power, confiscation, no power for persecution, no power for plundering a merchant. Necessary negotiate and discuss with each other. Therefore, a northern and the southern trader moved to this place of nobody. Westward, a French kingdom. Eastward, Holy Roman Empire. And its ideal place on the vacuum, somehow, a political vacuum. And organized a very special construction of fair. For you, I spoke about two different forms of the trade. The first one, a market, which are weekly market, organized once, 2 times, 3 times per week, and the fair, organized much longer period. For example, a fair, a country fair, it's maybe length 1 month or 2 months or 2 weeks, long time. In the place of Champagne and Brie, organized 2-month long fair and large area occupied, like recently a festival. Hungary, there is a famous festival, Ireland. It's 2 weeks time recently. Or Salisbury, very famous festival in UK. And somehow we can imagine this fair like recently a festival. Huge number of people, but not for entertainment, but for trade. But the people lived in this area for 2 months long time. Almost destroyed this environment. Therefore, the construction of the fair was chain of fair. 6 fair organized whole of the year, and the first place it spent 2 months, the next 2 months, finally it's moved over whole of the circle. Look at it. The first one, January, started the first fair, Lagny-sur-Marne. This is a French, small French city. The second one, at the beginning of March, Bar-sur-Aube. This was the second place. Why necessary to moving? Because the people ate, drink, necessary to visiting to the toilet. Therefore, no necessary to save time for cleaning the former place of fair. At the beginning of May, started the first fair in province. June, at the end of June, the Troy, the show, it's mean French hut fair. The next one, at the beginning of September, province, the second fair. And October, in Troy, the Froid, it's mean a cold fair. Why is so important? Because this construction introduced in the Low Country, former time. But on this place, on the Champagne and Brie region, whole of community, whole of society, of European trade society met year by year, and introduced so important innovation which directed the direction of development of European economy. Which were the most important innovation? The first one, merchant houses and agent network. Why so important? Because in the early Middle Ages and the first period of high Middle Ages, the trader personally traveled one place to other. It's very dangerous. Why? Because not only the merchants specialized to the trade, but the bandits who killed very frequently the merchant. Not by chance, a majority of merchants before a trade travel wrote testimony. It's dangerous job, because on his and her pockets there is huge money of coins, precious metal. Therefore, it's very highly motivated, the bandits, for killing a trader. It's very dangerous job to be a merchant and trader. And the most important merchant houses organized network, and not personally the head of merchant houses traveled one place to other, but agencies replaced the head of the merchant houses, and the agent traveled on the network. And each important city founded one agency. And this is the first milestone of network system, trading and commercial network system, formation of the network in Europe. Look at the second one. Introduced artificial money. Artificial money. Why so important? Because in early phase of the High Middle Ages, one of the most important barrier on the trade, not enough money, coin, not enough precious metal. And new innovation, it's named Bill of Exchange. It was a paper. And a trader wrote on the paper the value of this paper 100 gold ducats. And everybody accepted. It's artificial money. Artificial money. And which is the most important glue of the economy? A confidence. A confidence among each other, between each other. Its confidence is strong in the European economy. Products overflow with 10 to 17-fold the real precious metal. It's unbelievable, great dimension of development of European economy. Introduced artificial money. And the trajectory of artificial money, for example, in our life, no gold ducats, no silver ducats. Artificial, we are using artificial money. When I open my account, bank account, my first view that is positive or minus, it's the sign of the numbers, but it's no real money. Only we are sending electrical information to each other, to the service agency, to the workplace, and it's artificial communication. But this story started in the 13th century, making of artificial money. And the next important innovation are clearing system. Of course, on the time, the name was an Italian term, resconte. Resconte means, for example, somehow necessary to avoid the direct payment. Why necessary? Because never was enough coin, enough precious metal. Therefore, introduce the clearing system. How functions the clearing system? Look at two traders, two merchants, A and B. Not enough gold and silver ducats, therefore used a clearing system. A transported to B, for example, 5 items. And B transported and sold to A 3 items. And 1 year, half year and 1 year time, compare the items and only necessary to pay only the differences between the transported products, 2 units. Therefore, with help of clearing system, clearing the debt, avoided obligation of direct precious metal paying. And the last one, commission trade. Commission trade, this was a technology, commercial and trading technology, avoiding a direct precious metal paying. Somebody know the commission system? Commission system, it's quite a simple construction for the student of Faculty of Economics, I imagine. It's mean, for example, there is an artisan, produce, for example, a table. But the trader paying a price of table after the selling of the table. Therefore, a producer, an artisan, makes somehow a credit for the trader. This is the system for avoiding a direct pay. These were the most important innovation of fair of Champagne and Brie. Why so important? Recently, these are a very simple construction, but it's happened in the High Middle Ages. In the High Middle Ages, and not only innovated, but distributed whole of the Christian world on the time. And later, on the time of geographical discoveries, these will the stable basis of global economic system. This made a flexibility of European economy, not necessarily paid directly, but there is a gap between the real precious metal fortune and the ambition, the trading ambition of the trader. Okay, good. But finally, in the 14th century, in contrast with great success of bipolar European economic system collapsed. Its 14th century was the age of greatest crisis whole of the European civilization. It's named the period of Black Death, a Black Death, a period of great plague infection. Population of Europe estimated to the beginning of 14th century to 90 million, and to the middle of 14th century decreased to 60 million. Therefore, each third European died for 7-year-long period. It was the greatest crisis. It was a real disaster in European economy. But look at the reason why collapsed a European economy, temporary, but collapsed. The first one, climate deterioration. Recently, on the time of recent global warming, not so difficult to understand why problem when collapse somehow change a climate condition. On the traditional time, I hope you remember that 80% of European population, 80% of European population was primary producer. That survival, living standards, and the survival of majority of European population depend on the weather. Moreover, a European economic construction is very unflexible. A European agriculture named wine and wheat agriculture. Why? Because the most important plants was a grape and the wheat. No more. No so large scale of production compared with the modern time. Why? Because in the modern time there is a wheat, barley, rye, corn, potato. Therefore, there is a large scale and the producer able to combine different plants. And if, for example, wheat not so good, potato compensate. In the High Middle Ages, no option. Wheat and wine. And very determined and very limited the scale of playing for primary producer. Moreover, a climate deterioration means little ice age. Why little ice age? Because if we are looking at human evolution unfolded in the Great Ice Age. On the time of Great Ice Age, both polars, not only under frozen, not only ice cap, but the boundary of the ice cover reached the northern boundary of European continent. A British Isle and Scandinavia on the Great Ice Age period under ice cover was. And for example, in the Carpathian Basin in Hungary, no more, only grass vegetation, no bush, no trees, nothing. And on the Great Ice Age, the decrease of yearly average of temperature was minus 4 Celsius degree. It's great, huge cooling period. On the time of Little Ice Age, which unfolded between 14th to 19th century, only -1, much smaller, but on that time, on the cold period, in the Seine River in Paris and the Thames River in London organized during winter time winter fairs on the river. It's frozen over. Recently it's very rare. Climate deterioration decreased the vegetation period and decreased our temperature of vegetation period. The second one, the climate deterioration made agrarian crisis even at the beginning of 14th century. It named a green harvest. Why? Because vegetation period so short that not enough time and enough quantity of temperature for harvesting, and necessary to harvest, ripening, sorry, and not enough time for fine total ripening, therefore harvested with green seeds, which rotten, and launched a great famine in Europe. The most critical period was the 1300, between 313 and 17. Overpopulation. What means the overpopulation? Look at the trajectory of European population. If we are looking at trajectory of European population, this is the starting date of Christian calendar. This is the 50 million and 100 million. In the second century Anno Domini, according to Christian calendar, estimated population of Europe is 60 million. On the time of Great Migration, it was there are movies about historical movies about some period which able to show the atmosphere of one historical period. Somebody know the name of Arnold Schwarzenegger? There is his movie Canon the Barbarians. It's historically not reliable movie, but somehow able to show the atmosphere of age of Great Migration. No other rules, only the blood revenge. If somebody able, and there is a large network of relatives who able revenge for killing somebody, it's some secure personal, it's a personal security. This is the age of great migration, the heyday of chaotic period and the decline of population. The 6th century estimated the European population to 25 million. But after the late antiquity and early Middle Ages somehow recovered and reconstructed the European population, European state, European economy, European agriculture, and to the 10th century, European population reached the 50 million. And to the 14th century, reached to the 90 million. And according to contemporaries and agrarian historian, on the time, with the technology of agriculture, estimate the carrying capacity limit to 100 million. This is the ceiling, carrying capacity, upper ceiling. And somehow the population, it's reached the upper limit of carrying capacity. In this situation, launched a subsistence crisis. In the case of subsistence crisis, former time I spoke about yet, there are two indicators of the subsistence crisis. Underfeeding in double sense, quantitative underfeeding, not enough calorie, and qualitative underfeeding, not enough fine element of the feeding, vitamins, for example, nutrition, trace element, and so on and so on. In this case, it's possible, I spoke about former time, on hunger, in famine, nobody died, never, never. But it's a simplification in the historical documentary sources that a lot of people died in hunger. It's exceptionally might happen, but generally it's not true. Why? Because a hunger and the famine, it's decreased the efficiency of immunity. And the real killer, epidemic, sickness, different infection. Generally, the famine not enough for dying, before the dying, but in Russian history recently, it's quite popular, the Russian history, once documented real famine death. In Leningrad, somebody recently named St. Petersburg, but during the Second World War, named to Leningrad, was one bank of seeds. You know which is the bank of seeds. A different cereals saved for survival, which ever produced in Russia. And the scientist, the scholar who saved this bank of cereals died. For them, there is an option, 8 are seeds, but he decided not. It's unbelievable, determined scholars. Option, there is an option, survival, postponing, anyway, the death, and other option, death for famine. And option, the second version. Okay, but turn back to the story. Underfeeding, quantitative, qualitative underfeeding. Even in the historical contemporaries try to understand which is the reason of the crisis, which is the reason why died each third European. The first scientific theory about the crisis created Thomas Robert Malthus, who lived in the 18th and 19th century. We are looking in traditional aspect, it's contemporary in the traditional society. Okay, later we will turn back to the crisis. Okay, some word about the Malthusian crisis focused to the resource and population problem. The basic principle of Malthus that the population growth is quick, potentially very quick, and the production of agriculture not enough not enough dynamic compared with the population growth. Therefore, time by time in the history opened the scissor between the carrying capacity and population growth. And according to Malthus, there are 3 breaks: a war, a famine, and the epidemics which close the scissor. Okay, look at one climate diagram about the climate change of last 2,000 years. We can see a medieval warm period. Medieval warm period was the time when the Vikings sailed to Iceland, to Greenland, and sailed even to America. And this is the period of Little Ice Age, and recently we are on the time of recent global warming. But for us, necessary to focus to Little Ice Age. Little Ice Age named after the mountain glacier. The mountain glaciers are a good indicator of climate change. Its behavior very similar to thermometer. During the warm time, it's rising. During cold time, it's turned down. If we are somebody visit to Switzerland or Austria on the mountain area, very easy to realize a recent global warming. There are a milestone about the former position of the glacier. Recently melted down. But on the historical time, on the 14th century, the size of glacier increased. If we would like to understand the function and the behavior of the glacier, it's a frozen river, which indicates very closely the change of climate. Okay, some words about Thomas Robert Malthus, who lived at the turn of 18th and 19th century. He was an Anglican priest, but a polymath. You know which is the polymath? A little bit economist, a little bit demographer, a little bit author, and interested for the problem of population growth. Because the 18th century was similarly a similar period of population growth in Europe. Principle of Malthus, about these principles I spoke about yet. Population growth is exponential. How we can understand exponential population growth? Look at one couple. Husband and wife. Which is the potential starting date of couple? How old?
That time or now?
No, it historically.
Like 16?
No, 14. Probably you know the play of Romeo and Juliet, play of Shakespeare. How old Juliet? 14 years old. And her mother told to her, why waiting? You are even 40 years old. It's very old. Why? Because this is the optional starting date of birth. How the name? It's a pregnancy. It's how the name is it's starting date of starting and optimal date of pregnancy, first pregnancy. And very important to tell that on the traditional time necessary 2 births for one adult. Why? Because infantile mortality was 60%. Very high. Therefore, if we are looking at potential fertility of population, starting date in the case of women, 40 years, it's statistical simplification, and the closing date, 40 years. How many children able to produce in demographical sense? According to statistical simplification, each second year possible 1 birth. 26, but simplified a little bit, it's optimally 12 births, 12 children. But you remember, for one adult necessary 2 births. Therefore, one couple, if each conditions are optimal and were optimal, able to triple in one generation the population. Even other question, it's interesting question. How old, how long one marriage?
It's the same
12? 15? No. 7 years long one marriage in the traditional society. But recently, quite a general, if asked about young generation about the traditional society, how long? 20, 40, 50? Yeah, one exceptional period happened, a long marriage at the turn of 19th and 20th period. Why? Because the traditional custom survived, never divorced, and the modern clinical curing postpone and increase the life expectancy. But it's exceptional period. In the traditional time, not necessary to divorce. Why? Because so frequently die the people. For epidemics, for military campaign, for a problem with the birth, and a lot of occasions, epidemics and famine and so on and so. Therefore, the average time of marriage 7 years. The people in the traditional time, lot of times the survivors remarried. It was a normal. Recently, in the modern time, how long a marriage?
Recently?
7. I don't know why, but the optimal, not optimal, but real time span of marriage, same in the traditional time, in the modern time. But recently, the modern marriage closed with divorce, not the death. In the traditional time, much more, not necessary to divorce. It's not only for religious regulation. Not reason. On the case of kings and queens and the aristocracy, may be problem because the life expectancy in the aristocracy much longer, and made a lot of problem. No possibility. Look at the history of Henry VIII. It's 2 of his wife killed, not killed, but how the name is slaughtered somehow. Okay, population growth exponential on 1 generation able triumph the fertility. The growth of agrarian production arithmetical. What mean? 1, 2, and 10% the maximal dimension of the flexibility of the growth potential. Therefore, as I mentioned, the scissor between the carrying capacity and the population growth, it's open time by time. And the breaks, which introduced by Malthus, epidemics, wars, and famines, which closed our carrying capacity and population growth. But it's a traditional theory, but the modern history introduced not only Malthusian, but other theory about the reason, the triggering reason of demographic crisis. The first one, it's a neo-Malthusian theory about the balance between the population and resources. We are over because it's repeat and a little bit scienticized Malthusian theory. But look at the second one. Made a historical past, a demographic and subsistence crisis, if change the balance between population and structure of land ownership. Look at very simple example. Probably you know the term of primogeniture. Primogeniture. A primogeniture is a herring system. For example, there is a large family and the oldest son receives everything. And other son and daughter useless. For example, you know the history of the crusade. A crusade. It was a great military campaign with a lot of waves, a lot of military campaign for reconquering a holy land, Jerusalem and the Near East. Demographical background, overproduction of useless son of noble family. And the people who didn't receive almost anything wrote to the Near East and tried to conquer and form a new household. And other problem made, for example, the parallel heritage system. Every son and daughter received the same slice from the estate. But after a productive family, the size of estate after some generation became a dwarf estate, a dwarf estate. For example, in the Hungarian history, there is a term for nobleman. It's 7 plum trees nobleman, because estate size so small that grow only 7 plum tree. It's not successful construction, so small size of estate. Therefore, if lost the balance on the heritage system, some situation made a subsistence crisis. And finally, the complex relation between population, agrarian production and the markets. On the traditional time, it's quite general that one area, the agrarian surplus, fed by animals. From 50 kilometers, the people died for famine and epidemics. Why? Because no information and no devices for transport one place to another. Not by chance, the first journal, the first European journal published in the 16th century was the Journal of Fuggers. It's German merchant houses. It's first European journal, not a literature, not an art journal, economic journal was. Why? Because the editors of the Fugger journal collected the prices of products and the markets and tried to communicate and organize the network on which places good decision transport, for example, cereals or fruits or vegetables. Therefore, according to reconstruction, on the time of 14th century crisis, generally, Europe produced enough feeds, but not good distribution. And no information which area there is and there was a shortage and which area are overproduction. Good. Look at the situation. Let's not jump. Look at the Black Death. The Black Death. The Black Death, it's some contemporary picture. On the body appeared a black bulb. A black bulb. It's not so good, but on this picture you can identify. About the plague, necessary to tell a bacterial infection. A bacterial infection. And there's quite a general opinion that distributor, as in the medicine, tell a vector are rats. It's not true. The real vectors were flea. Somebody had a flea? Yeah? I had. Flea, you know. It's a small insect jumping and living together. Nobody. It's over-civilized community. During my childhood, I slept together with my cat. And I imagine, I spent my childhood in a small village, and I imagined that it's a normal of the hygiene of the body, a small number of flea, less than 10 flea. Because I live together with my cat whole of the day, whole of the night, and I had fleas. There is a special technology for killing a flea. If somebody interested for this special skills, after the lecture I can tell the skills to interested student. Anyway, it's very small. It's not a real size of the flea. It's a microscopic picture. The real size is very, very small. Very, very small. But the flea, it's very loyal animal. There is a pig flea, there is a cat flea, a dog flea, a a horse flea and a human flea. Why? Because the skin, the nature of the skin and the cover of the skin basically different. Because the cat flea necessary to navigate on the fur of the cat. For example, pig size of the skin of pig is very not thin. It's very large. Therefore, basically different devices necessary for that. But the flea, there is a small small, how the name is, a special tunnel pushing into the water and somehow it's sucking a blood. It's very simple technology. But how able to make a small insect a huge pandemic with 30 million victims? The most important to define the homeland of the plague. Two homelands we can identify in the traditional time. The first one, eastern part of Africa, majority of plague infection which launched in the Roman Empire started to eastern part of Africa because it was the common border with Egypt. And the second one, outskirt of Himalaya, of course not the highest mountain part, but outskirt of Himalaya. In Asia, Central Asia and eastern part of Himalaya. And look at the trajectory of the pandemic. The triggering, you know which is the trigger? It's a trigger. It's on the shotgun, you push a trigger and launch the shot. In the different sciences use the triggering effect. Why so important? Because you take a small operation, push the trigger, and launch a chain of interaction. You are not able to close. Small even. And the triggering effect, majority of pandemic infection start with drought, a dry period. Which is the consequence of drought? Everybody destroy vegetation, prey animals, and predators. But each drought, after some time, is closing, and the nature and the ecosystem start to recover. Which is the quickest? Vegetation. Which is the second one? Prey animals. Prey animals. Look at, for example, rats or rodents. Which is the life cycle? There is a lab between two rodents or mice, and the cycle 3 weeks for next generation. It's very short. Look at the predators, the fox, the wolves, lions, and the predator birds. A lot of months, 3, 5, 6, 8 months. Therefore, a prey animals, a bearer of I failed. While Homeland, turn back a little bit, you never forget the drought, but jump a little bit before the drought. East Africa and Himalaya, why homeland of plague? Because East African area and outskirts of Himalaya living rodents which were and are bearer of bacteria, but himself and herself never became sick. Only bearer. The bacteria somehow living inside of body, but never make infection. Bearer. For example, if somebody would like to make, it's for example, infectology named zero patient. These species are a zero patient. Only bearer the infection. No make in his and her body a real sickness and infection. Eastern Africa, India. But the question, how launched, how proliferate this infection? And the next step, drought. And these rodent prey animals overpopulate after the drought and left the homeland because overpopulate and wandering eastward, westward, northward, southward, and meet with gray rat. Gray rat is very important. Gray, a lot of rats species and subspecies are, but the key distributor are gray rat. Probably you read Harry Potter. Harry Potter. And you know the Peter Pettigrew, who are able to make himself to red. It's very important. Not black red, gray red. Gray. Why? It's a history, not historical. It's somehow literature. In the English literature, there is a special category of the gray rat. Why? Because in the centuries, over the centuries, the everyday experiences of Englishmen living together with the gray rat, somehow a member of family. A member of family. Why? Because the gray rat live together the animal. There is a double sympathy, both sides. Anyway, infected rodents of the East Africa and Himalaya, the gray rat, and the gray rat ecosystem, it's over covering with the human ecosystem. And the flea, it's jump to the human and proliferate a bacterial infection. Look at the trajectory of 14th century. There's some picture because plague even recently not able to make, later I will speak about why, not able to make epidemics and pandemics, but some local situation, for example, in Romania, in the Danube Delta area, India, in the Bangladesh, time by time appear some infected person. And named to Black Death because the speed of blood, it's decreased so much that it's somehow appear the first symptom of plague on the blood circulation, the peripheral part of the blood circulation. Of flea. Therefore, the flea bite the people, but the blood never arrived to the stomach. Therefore, bite, jump, bite, jump, bite, jump, and increase the speed of infection. And finally, the gut clogged the bacteria of flea, and flea by the human and regurgitated its vomit bag. The blood into the open wound. The contemporaries didn't know any information about this form of infection. There is a mythical imagination, general opinion about the reason of the infection, that the human did a lot of sin. Therefore, this infection punishment of the God. The most important way of epidemics and pandemics, the great trading and the great commercial routes. You can see the red one is the Great Silk Road, and the blue one, a Great Spice Road. The bubonic plague and the Black Death appeared on the red one, on the red trading routes, a Great Silk Road. We can identify a place of when infected the first European with the bubonic plagues. It's located to the Crimean Peninsula, recently named to Feodosia, but on that time, located here, on that time named to Kaffa, and was a Genoese trading colony. And how infected the Genoese people? One Asian army took under siege a Kaffa and wasn't able to conquer a city. Therefore, in the last phase of siege, applied a biological weapon. A biological weapon. What means the biological weapon? There is a catapult on the army, and a dead body of Asian soldier, take to the basket of the catapults and tumble in to the city. And the people infected, and from Kaffa, a Genoese ships brought the infection, and the infection proliferated very quickly in Europe. Why? You remember, Europe on that time overpopulated. Appeared a new infection, no natural immunity, no efficient technology of curing, and like, for example, filling a gas or gasoline in this building and take a match and a light and blowing. It happened in the 14th century. Appeared a new infection to the population, very bad immunity, and pop. This is the map of proliferation of infection. Only 2 areas survived with moderate loss. Northern part of Europe. Why? Because very low density of population. And the most important actor of distributor was the trader and the beggars. The mobile person. And the Eastern Europe, for same reason, low density of population. And the southern part of Iberian Peninsula, because this was the part of Muslim world. Therefore, a military boundary separated 2 parts of the Iberian Peninsula, a Muslim and the Christian. And of course, this connection and this network functioned only in the Christian world. How reacted the people, the contemporaries, for the great disaster? Because not only the poor people died, even kings and members of aristocracy and nobility, everybody. The death didn't select on the time. Because in the traditional Middle Ages, much higher the density, the probability of the death, the mortality in lower class, underclass. And the higher class, it's moderate. But on the time of Black Death, each social classes almost the same proportion killed. Therefore, everybody agreed this is the days of judgment. Days of judgment, and we are very close to the approaching of second approaching of Jesus Christ. Okay, contemporaries agreed this is the punishment of God, and applied and launched the mechanism of scapegoating. Everybody know what means the scapegoating? Everybody know? Scapegoating. Okay. Who are responsible for the punishment of the God? And look at the list of the ideal responsible person. Aliens. Not from the space, of course. Aliens, it's enough money from the neighborhood, from the neighboring village. It's very easy to activate xenophobia, you know, which is the xenophobia, a xenophobia. Why so sharp political weapon, a xenophobia? Because if we are looking at human history from the 8 million years, not 4 million years ago started, if we are looking at human history, never was enough resources. Never. Only in the modern time, in the 20th century, we can tell. Therefore, a historical experiences, if somebody approaching arrive, even very peaceful, dangerous for our resources. Therefore, xenophobia is very deep in the human, because able jump on the rational thinking. It's emotional reaction. I don't want to distribute my quote. It's my best quote, not best, one of my quote. It's reaction. Reaction is very spontaneous and emotional reaction. Aliens. You can select from the best of aliens of the Christian history of the Christendom. Jews organized the first pogroms. In the Mediterranean area, where much higher the proportion of the Muslim became the victims of the pogroms too. And Armenians, who Christian, but it's heretical. It's other direction of the Christian religion. Aliens, sorry.
Where was the Armenians and the Muslims a minority?
Because on the time the majority are Roman Catholic.
Where exactly?
In Europe.
Yeah, where?
I misunderstood something?
Like where exactly in Europe?
Yeah, but the Jews lived almost everywhere.
Yeah.
The Muslims in the southern part. And the southern part. Yeah, but because if we are looking at Mediterranean Sea, on the early Middle Ages, Sicily, it's under Muslim control.
Yeah.
The majority of Iberian Peninsula similarly. And there is a commercial interaction. Therefore, a Muslim trader infiltrated somehow in the northern coastal area of Mediterranean Sea. And in normal situation, the trade is peaceful operation. But in critical situation, the peaceful trader became a victim of the pogroms. But in the Mediterranean Sea. But for example, in the Hungarian history, even in the 12th and the 11th century, in the royal court lived Muslims and Russians. Why? Because the most reliable person. No any connection, social connection in the country, and depend on the personally to the chancellor or to the person of the king. Therefore, each royal court lived minorities, and the most reliable person was the member of the minorities, because no other chance for survival with good connections for the king and for the middle aristocracy. Okay. And the Armenians, it's very interesting. Did you meet with Armenians personally? No? Armenians. In Hungary, in the Hungarian history, lived a great Armenian community in Transylvania. Recently is a part of Romania, but former time was a part of Hungary. But there is a special identical history. But in Armenians moved to Transylvania on the time of Ottoman Empire. It was very interesting period because Jerusalem and, for example, Debrecen, Hungarian plain area city, was on the same country, Ottoman Empire. And to the fair of Debrecen, in the 17th century, arrived trader from Jerusalem, because it was the same country. This was the Ottoman Union on the time. Okay, and Armenians, excellent trader. Armenians named the Jews of Asia. Jews of Asia, for example, specialized to the diamond trade, a diamond trade in Asian area. And for example, in Gyergyósz and Miklós in Transylvania city, formed a great Armenian community, the best trader. And the local trader no chance beside the Armenians. And the local city council decided that the Armenians might open the shop only after 10 a.m. Change the playground. Therefore, local terms, local slogan, 10 a.m. This is the Armenian dawn. This is the how the name is, early morning, 10 a.m. Because for Armenians, there is a scale of, for example, according to local scale, value of different people. 10 Romanian, 1 Hungarian. 10 Hungarian, 1, how the name is, CK, there is a local minorities like, for example, Austrian in the German community. There is a local identity. Turn back. 10 Romanian, 1 Hungarian. 10 Hungarian, 1 CK. 10 CK, 1 Jews. 10 Jews, 1 Armenian. This is the local scale of intellectual skills of Transylvania. Okay, but aliens. The first scapegoats, turn back to the main way of the story, aliens, like a victim. The second one, women. And women became victims of witch hunting. Why became? Because, probably you know, the institution of celibacy. A celibacy. For the priest of Roman Catholic Church prohibited living together with women. But nobody accepted. Therefore, it's ideal type of scapegoating. A priest declared, I have a sin. I live together with device of the devil. And which is the solution of devil devices? Burning. And this was the great age of witch hunting. But in the Middle Ages, a witch hunting, it's not atypical. A witch hunting was a typical operation of Inquisition in the Reformation and Counter-Reformation early modern time. It's exceptional. But on the time of witch hunting killed more than 1,000 victims even in Europe. Why? Because the priest didn't practice the celibacy. And broken of celibacy, a little sin. Therefore, the priest would like to survive somehow and declare that I was a weak, but I was weak because this device of devil with practice of temptation and seduction and so, and which is the solution of the situation? Burning of witch. And the last one, a flagellant. You know which is the flagellant? A flagellant, it's declared we are responsible for the disaster, and approaching the judgment day, therefore not necessary to work, not necessary to pay in the taxes and the fees, only singing religious song and walking on the street and beat themselves. And the contemporary political power hated them. It's a large community. 1 million member had of flagellant brotherhood. 1 million. And reaction of political power was very cruel. Kill them, and slaughter them. Why? Because afraid that proliferate the imagination that not necessarily pay in the taxes. Because approaching the second arrival of Jesus Christ. Okay, how try to defend for the infection by contemporaries? The first one, a quarantine or quarantine, different spelling are, it's a Venetian Italian terms, Venetian dialect, mean 40 days. 40 days. Even in the modern epidemics, and the COVID epidemics, used the quarantine. Not 40 days, 5 days or 10 days or 2 weeks. It changed in different phases of the COVID infection and the region, but separation, the infected person. The quarantine means somebody arrived from infected area, close to one building, one island, one place, and wait to the symptom of infection. If there is left in the closed place, if not, may continue the travel. Very interesting, the quarantine, even though one of the most efficient techniques or technology, curing technology for epidemics. The second form of spontaneous defense, extenuation of disease bacteria. How function the extenuation? Look at one situation. Bacteria, person, infected person. Which bacteria the most successful? There is a strong bacteria, medium, strong bacteria, weak bacteria. Which is the most successful? Weakest one. Why? Because the strongest one kills the infected person. And no chance for proliferation. Therefore, generation by generation by generation, the community of bacteria weaker and weaker and weaker. Why? Because it's much higher the chance of proliferation, the weak infection, the weaker bacteria. Look at the other side. On the other side, on the community, there is some proportion of the contemporaries a spontaneous and natural immunity for infection. Of course, there is a higher chance of survival with natural immunity. Therefore, generation by generation, the bacteria, the infection became weaker and weaker and weaker, immunity stronger and stronger and stronger. And very interesting, without devices of modern curing, to the middle of 18th century, there is a climax point, disappear. Without any medical operation. This is the process of extenuation. Necessary 5 centuries for that. But somehow, in natural manner, able to disappear some form of infection. And the last one, a self-regulating family system. Contemporaries understood that one of the most important problems of disaster, it's social disaster, are overpopulation. And somehow necessary to solve the problem of overpopulation. Flagellant? Okay. The self-regulating family system described first time a French historical demographer. His name is Louis Henry. And he elaborated the natal, marital, and mortal parish register. Why so important? Because if we are looking at historical demography of traditional time, we have a lot of census. But a census, number of population, only one data, no more. But with help of a parish register, we can identify 3 key events of human. Birth, marriage, and the death. And on the parish register contain information not only about the date of birth, marriage, and the death, but the circumstances. For example, who are godfather and the godmother? Social strategy. about the capacity of literacy, able to sign or not able to sign, and the social status, lot of information. Therefore, with help of this parish register, whole of the trajectory of the life somehow able to reconstruct. Therefore, Louis Henry tried to identify a local population, how able to manipulate the number of birth. You remember the fertility period starts around 40 years old and close to the 14 to 40 years old period. It's 26 years long period. This is the age, this is the period of fertility. Therefore, the custom law, the local custom law, everywhere in Europe, try to manipulate the fertility. How? Look at two actors. We have to calculate with two actors. A husband, a man, and a wife, a woman. Husband is closed out, it's an animal, not able to manipulate any demographical process, focused to the women. And the most important device of, this is the fertility period, the most important high infant mortality rate I spoke about, age of women first marriage. Why first? Because I told to you, 7 years long marriage and a lot of remarriaging. Age of women first marriage. Why? Because in crisis, economic crisis period, pushed back and pushed up the age of first marriage. Out of marriage, practically very, very tiny proportion of the birth. Very, very. Why? Because stigmatized the contemporaries, the women who born a child out of marriage. Therefore, first marriage, age of first marriage, it's very efficient devices. On the good period, on the great economic growth period, it's down to 14 years, but on the critical and the crisis period, it's pushed up. For example, in England, on the time of Tudors, in the 16th century, it was the deepest crisis whole of the English history. On the backward, it's a golden age, but on the contemporary, for the contemporaries, it was a huge crisis, huge crisis. On the 16th century, average age of first marriage in England, in the traditional time, was for women, 30 years old. Why? Because a contemporary society break the fertility, and between 30 and 40 left 10 years. On the 10 years, there is a chance for example, 4 births. For high mortality rate, left only 2. And the society only slow down the fertility to simple reproduction. Therefore, this was one of the most important devices of manipulation of productivity, demographical productivity of traditional Europe. Okay, and the life expectancy at birth 20 to 30. Very important to mention that life expectancy calculate in different ages. Life expectancy of at birth in Hungary, for example, for male population is 76. But very interesting, if somebody, if we are looking at life expectancy of Hungarian male between 35 and 45, it's very tragical. This is the death period for the Central European man. And if somebody survived these 10 years, this decade, improved the life expectancy. Therefore, necessary to calculate, to reckon to each age of life expectancy. This is a simplification, of course. Okay? How change the political structure? This will be the last slide. Turn to direction, the political system of Europe after the crisis. The first, it's left the feudal structure, like, for example, Poland, like Spanish Naples, and the consequence of that was very tragical. In consequence of feudal structure, saving of feudal structure, for example, Poland disappeared from the map of Europe. It's divided between Prussia, Russia, therefore so very bad relation with the Poland and the Polish and the Russian, and Habsburg monarchy. And other direction of development of European countries are centralization. The most important centralized countries was England, France, and Russia. We will continue from this slide my lecture in 1 week time. Thanks a lot for your attention.